No way, that's him. Hello everybody, and welcome. Today I'll be showing you guys my build for my full crit physical Blood Mage. This build is quite satisfying, and it excels in both map clearing and bossing. So overall, just a really good, solid, well-rounded build, in my opinion. I hope that you guys enjoy this build as much as I have, because I've been having an absolute blast. Now, getting to these skills. The main skills that we use, there aren't a lot actually. There's mainly 3, so very simple build. We use Bone Cage. This is just to keep them off us. This pins enemies that come nearby. And then we also get our first few corpses from there. And then we use Detonate Dead. And we virtually play dominoes for the rest of the map from there, heading forwards. We also have Bonestorm. This is mainly for bossing, as well as sniping elites that you see in the distance, or if you're like in an uncomfortable situation where you don't want to get close to them. We snipe them, and then once again, Detonate Dead, boom boom boom, and there we go. We also use Vulnerability. This is mainly for bossing, just to strip down their armor even more. And then if you want to, you can use Flame Wall as well. If you cast down Flame Wall, and the projectiles from Bonestorm, when they do pass through there, they will still keep the flat fire damage from this firewall, if you guys didn't know that. And now for a quick example of the playstyle. Pretty simple. They come towards us, we use our Bone Cage, they are pinned, and then we detonate, because most of the time that'll give you your first body as well. These orbs here, we have to pick those up as well. And what those are is... they are these life remnants from our passive, from the Blood Mage Ascendancy tree. And all this does is it drops these little life orbs, and that allows us to overstack on our life. And then the white ones, they come from this guy over here, Feast, which allows us to overstack on our energy shield as well. So we can potentially have double the amount of life that you have, and double the amount of shield that you have, and something's being very annoying here. So in cases like this, we can just use Bonestorm if they're far away, snipe them there, get a body, detonate, and then we just keep on detonating, playing dominoes from there. These are the shield ones, those are the life ones, we pick those up, as you can see, we keep on overstacking as we are killing them. So yeah, snipe, detonate, if they run towards us, we simply use Q, pin them in place, there's elite there, whatever, detonate. Most of the time, like that, the elite will just pop in the distance, you won't even know there was an elite, which is quite satisfying. You just see items falling down on the screen somewhere. Quite satisfying. Right, and as for bossing, this is where we use our vulnerability. Simply drop it there, and then we start mauling her down. We break armor as well, as you can see. That is just from our passive tree. I'll show that later on in our skill tree where that comes from. And then we just simply burst her down like so. That's her flame wall, that's not mine. But if you wanted to, I didn't use this, but yeah, you can do flame wall and then shoot through. Now, getting to our skill gems. Starting at the top here, this is mana drain. Just ignore that. That's because I'm using an attuned wand. If you can get yourself a bone wand, then you can actually do something with this, because it gives you bone blast, which is also a physical skill. But for now, just ignore that one. Next up, we have life remnants. This comes from our ascendancy. This one here, which you are forced to pick. This is the one which adds a base life cost equal to the mana cost of all our skills, which is not very fun. That's why you see the life cost on all of our abilities. It does, however, give us the life remnants, which is these ones. So 25% chance on dropping one of these little life orbs whenever we kill an enemy, or 100% chance to drop one of these whenever we crit, which is all of the time, because we have got 100% crit chance, but it can't trigger once, more than once every 2 seconds. And they simply restore 410 life when we pick them up, and that allows us to overcap on our life up to double the amount of life that you have. And then as for our supports, these are more luxury really. I'm using Cannibalism at the cost of 15 spirit. It simply gives us 4% of a max life recovered whenever we kill an enemy. Clarity at the cost of 10 Spirit, which gives us 30% increased mana regeneration, which isn't too bad. And then we also have Vitality at the cost of 20 Spirit. This simply regenerates 1% of our max life per second. And next up, we have Bone Cage. This is simply our disengage tool, and this also pins the enemies that run towards us, because you'll have loads of little mobs running towards you and so on. So we just use it to disengage, and then because it does deal a fair amount of damage as well, in most cases this also gives us our first few bodies to detonate. These supports, we use Lockdown for 120% more pin buildup. Arcane Surge, because we do use this quite often as we're map clearing. And that simply gives us 10% more cast speed, 20% more mana regeneration. Persistence. This just allows the spikes to be on the ground and last for 40% longer. So the spikes stay there a bit longer, and that gives the enemies more chance to run into it and then pin themselves. And lastly, Spell Cascade. Simply allows it to repeat once in every direction, so it's twice, and that just causes it to proc once and then once more in each direction. It just feels good. Just having a single one doesn't feel as good. So more spikes, more chance of them pinning themselves, and then we just bomb them further from there. Next up, we have Bonestorm. This guy is pretty much our bread and butter when it comes to sniping elites and bossing. So we have the initial damage, which is of course physical, and then it also has a second part. So we generate a load of projectiles, we snipe them forwards, and then they hit the enemy, and they also apply a second part, which is this explosion part. So this adds a debuff to the enemy, which lasts for 10.5 seconds, and they do accumulate. So this gives us ramping damage. So with bosses, like this one here for example, you can see the current stacks of Bonestorm by this little icon here, and that is the amount of debuffs that are currently on the enemy. So our next attack and the one after that and so on, they deal increasing and increasing damage, and after 10 seconds then these will expire, and then we deal the regular damage from the projectile itself only once again. The support gems with this fella is Considered Casting. It does cost us 15% cast speed, but we gain 40% more damage. Next up, Heft. Simply gives us straight up 30% more physical damage. Then we have Scattershot, which is a tricky one. So it gives us 20% less attack and cast speed and 20% less damage, but it does generate 2 additional projectiles. So if we take this off, you can see our DPS skyrockets. Pop that back in, 60k, but this 60,000 that it displays here doesn't account for the extra 2 projectiles. So in reality, this 60 should be 180 is what it should display here if these extra 2 were taken into account. So yeah, trust me, this one makes a massive difference. Next up we have Brutality, just an extra 35% more physical damage at the cost of no chaos or elemental damage, but this does not affect the flat damage, funny enough, from Firewall. So if you cast Firewall, the projectiles will still go through and they will still get ignited, so that flat fire damage will still be applied if you do wish to use Flame Wall. And then lastly, we use Physical Mastery to get +1 to the level of the spell. Very important that we try and get this one as high as possible, which is why if you have a look here as well, this is actually a level 21 gem, and you can get that from corrupting a gem. So you can see there at the very top, +1 from corruption. So you can do that in order to get +1 extra, spell level on this guy. And then next up, we have the star of the show, Detonate Dead, which makes this build so fun, just absolutely destroying anything in our path, blowing up everything we see. Alright, so the damage type this does is fire as a flat damage, which we don't care about. And then the key part is this, it deals physical damage equal to 20% of the corpse's maximum life. We are, of course, scaling that physical damage in our build, through our gear and through the skill points that we're using as well. So we scale the amount of physical damage we deal, and then we also crit on top of that. So we crit for the 20% of the corpse's max life, and then we also multiply that with our critical damage bonus as well. Super good. And what's good to know is this scales with any map level, obviously. So whether you're high tier, low tier, 20% is always going to be 20%. So this scales with the enemy's life as well. So really, really good. One more thing worth mentioning is currently we are paying 112 mana and life to use this, and we really want to spam this. So I've noticed something. This 20% corpse max life, which is, is the only thing we're interested in really, is that physical damage. This doesn't scale with gem level. So if I take this off, I'm using the bare minimum, which is level 7 detonate dead for my build. If we take a level 19, it's not even max. If we pop this in there and then we go ahead and we add these to port, we are now paying 820 mana and life for fire damage that we don't care about. So no thank you. We'll rather stick with paying 112 mana and life for damage that we can actually use. So yeah, that's pretty good, and that is a good deal. Thank you, I will take that deal, Mr. Detonate, sir. Getting to the sport gems, we use Spell Echo. It just causes it to repeat one more time. It does cost us 30% cast speed, but the repeat does deal 30% more area of effect. And just bear in mind, each repeat does consume a corpse as well. So along with that, we just have magnified effect, which is just more area effect, 40%. And then I also use Unleash. I quite like this one. It does, however, deal 50% less damage when reoccurring, but it generates us a seal every 200% of the cast time to a maximum of 2 seals. So we will in most cases have 1 or 2 of these seals, and then we also have 1 or 2, well it's going to be 2 with Spell Echo. So you have the original explosion, plus 1 from Spell Echo, and then we'll have 3 or 4 with this one as well. So in most cases we will have 3 or 4 explosions, where 2 of them will only deal 50% damage, but overall in the grand scheme of things it really doesn't make a difference. It just helps the clear speed significantly by using this one. Along with that, we have Inspiration, fairly simple, just 40% less cost. And then along with that we use Arcane Tempo, which is one I've only added recently. So I just got a perfect Jeweler's Orb and I was like, you know what the hell, let me use it. And then I added this one. I used to run only with these 4 here, and I've added this one recently. And next up, we have Vulnerability. So we simply use this for bossing exclusively. So we curse the boss in order to maximize our damage. And all this does is we ignore 15,000 of their damage in order to maximize on that physical damage. And the only support team I'm running with this one currently is Cursed Ground. So all this does is this allows the curse to stay within this area. So the curse activates, and now it leaves this cursed ground area. And as long as the boss remains within this, it just keeps on reapplying that curse. And then I am also currently running Blink. This is quite an interesting one, and you can kind of decide if you want to use this or not. All this does is this replaces our regular dodge roll with a short little teleport instead. And at the top here, you can see our cooldown. So it simply allows us to blink, which is quite good for, avoiding like explosions and insta-kill hits, that sort of thing. But if you don't like this, then that's perfectly fine. I'll show you a different one in a moment that you can use instead. So use this one just to kind of blink around and whatnot. This is also particularly useful, I should add, for getting over impossible terrain for mapping. Saves you from running around and all that sort of stuff. Only support gem I'm running with this one is simply Ingenuity, which gives it 30% increased cooldown recovery rate. And if you don't want to run this one, which costs us 60 spirit by the way, you can also run Blasphemy, which is what I used to run. So all this does is, let me see if I can actually switch this on. And just take out one of these random support gems so I can actually activate it. No, one more. Let me take that one out. There we go. And now I can see we simply have a curse aura around us. So with Blasphemy, you can put in any type of curse that you really want to. But the only one that I am using really is Enfeeble. So if you'd rather dodge roll and whatnot, then that's perfectly fine. We can do, the same old, same old. And all this does is it reduces the damage of enemies surrounding us. So it's quite a defensive aura to have, which isn't half bad if you do find that, you're taking a lot of damage. The support I'm taking with this is simply this one, Heightened Curse. It just increases the effect of the supported curse by 25%. Next up, we have Crim Feast. This one costs us 30 spirit, and all this does is whenever an enemy dies within our presence or an allied reviving minion, for like you minion build guys, it has a 50% chance of spawning one of these little life remnants, those little white orbs that we pick up. They simply give us 262 energy shield per orb that we pick up, and that allows us to overstack on your energy shield. So whatever energy shield you have, you can get double the amount if you keep collecting these, which is quite nice to build up a buffer, before you get to the boss. So yeah, quite a nice aura. I do strongly recommend. It's very nice. Next one, Flame Wall. I don't really use this one anymore. But yeah, it's quite simple. We throw the firewall. We don't really care about the wall actually damaging enemies that is around us, and then our projectiles from Bonestorm simply goes through there, and it adds that flat damage that we have there. So each projectile does 113 to 161 added fire damage at the moment, and bear in mind that we shoot about 10 to 20 of these projectiles, so it does add up quite a lot, in terms of flat fire damage. Alternatively, I would say just ignore this. It's more of a luxury in my opinion. But if you do want to run this, the support gem is simply Fire Mastery, +1 to supported fire skills, and then we also use Fortress. Supported skills deal 50% less damage with hits. We just ignore that part because we don't use it to attack people with it for our projectiles. And then the main bit is that, it casts it as a circle around us, so we can fire our projectiles in whatever direction that the enemy is. And that is all of our skill gems done. Next up, let's move on to our passive skill tree, shall we? Alright, so starting right at the bottom here at our starting location, we go with this left-hand side. We pick this one here, so that is 8% increased spell damage. We don't deal minion damage, so just ignore that. Same there, another 8% spell damage, another 8%, another 8%, and then we lead into this one here. So 16% spell damage and 10 to intelligence. You grab this one, another 8% spell damage, and then we get 10% increased physical damage here, and then we grab this one here, 15 increased crit chance, and another 18% increased physical damage. Up here, another one, 8% there, 8% being spell damage, of course, and then we grab intel, we work ourselves to this area and this one, just because these nodes are so good, I can't ignore them, so I need to take these. So from here down to the middle, we grab this one, 15% increased spell damage bonus. On the right hand side here, another 15%, and then we grab the big node here, 15% increased crit chance and 15% increased spell damage if we've dealt a crit recently. If you need crit hit chance, all of these crit nodes have got a different route to them. So if you don't want the crit damage yet because you haven't quite reached your crit hit chance quota, if you go to the left hand side here, you can always get 10% crit hit chance as well. But since I'm on 100%, I go the other route around. From there, we go here, intel, grab this one here, 15% increased energy shield recharge rate. We grab this guy, a big 28% increased maximum energy shield, and we also gain 12% of our maximum energy shield as stun threshold, because as a mage you don't have a lot of stun threshold. We then grab this one here, another 15% energy shield recharge rate, and this one here at the bottom, which is another big 30% increased maximum energy shield and 10 intelligence. From here we branch to the right hand side here, And then we go up here, we grab this here. This is our area of effect for our detonate dead. So intel, intel, intel. Then we grab this one, 8% increased area of effect, another 8%. And then we take this one here, which gives us 30% increased area of effect at the cost of 10% reduced area damage. Then we continue going to the right hand side here. We grab 15% increased max energy shield, and another 10% increased max energy shield with 6% mana regenerate, another 10% and 6% mana regenerate. And then we take this one here, 18% max energy shield, 12% increased mana regen, and 6% increased overall intelligence. I frequently take this one as well, so if you would like, you can go this route round as well. This one also gives 15% increased max energy shield, and this one gives a big old 40%, which is quite nice. I have taken this one in the past, so you can take 40% increased max energy shield at the cost of 10% reduced maximum mana. And then we pop on, pop down, there's another crit tree. So we get 10% increased crit chance, 50% increased crit damage, and then we get another 25% increased crit chance here. There is, of course, again, another route here. You can get increased crit chance there, and then you can go this this way around if you need. From here, we branch all the way down. Intel, intel, intel. I did take this in the past. If you find that you get stun locked all the time, which is a horrible feeling, you can take this one here. So this is 20% increased stun threshold, another 20%, and then this one here just stops you from being chain stunned. I have played around with this in the past. It actually feels pretty good, but you get 60% increased stun threshold for each time you've been stunned recently. So whenever you get, like, you get frozen, and then they kind of mob you, and then you're just in like an endless cycle where you can't do anything. Whenever that happens, then this one just gets you out of the situation, because each time you get stunned, your stun threshold increases by 60%. And that is if you've been stunned recently, and I think recently is 4 seconds, yeah. So yeah, it stops you getting out of that cycle. Anyway, just good to know about that being there as well. Moving down, intel, then we branch up here. 15% increased critical damage bonus, another 15%, and then we grab this one here. 25% increased critical damage bonus if you've dealt a non-crit recently, and 20% increased critical hit chance. I'm mainly taking this for the 20% increased crit chance, but if you have got, say, 80% or 70 or whatever, if you haven't reached 100% crit hit chance like me, then you can make use of that first part, which I currently am not, because I'm on 100% crit hit chance. And then down here, we have another 10% crit chance, and this fella here, 30% increased damage if we've dealt a critical hit in the past 8 seconds, which I do all the time. Great, so that's that part of the tree done. Now let's go back here. Moving upwards, intel, intel, that's strength for some reason. And then we take this one here, 50% increased critical spell damage bonus, another 50%, and then we gain 16% increased critical hit chance, as well as 8% increased cost speed if you've dealt a crit recently. Once again, you can get some increased crit chance there if you need. From there, let's go to the left-hand side, intel, 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 blah, 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 and then we get our first jewel socket. So with the jewels, it's pretty simple. Just try and get a jewel that gives you at least 18% increased maximum energy shield, and then from there, all you really want is crit chance if you need, or crit damage. Simple as that. On the one at the top here, this is quite an expensive one, but any case. So once again, max energy shield, and then I got both crit damage bonus and spell critical damage bonus, which both stack, funny enough. This works for our build. And then just, some generic other things, whatever you can get. Faster start of energy shield, blah, blah, blah. So, just to show you that, so I don't know why it is worded this way, but anyway. See, if I were to do this right now, I've got 428. And if I unequip this guy, you can see that drops significantly. So 399, pop that in, 428. So both of those stack, as you can see, the increased critical damage bonus and the increased spell critical damage, both of those stack towards this multiplier. So it's nice to it's just nice to try and double up on both if you can. Okay, so from here, we can pop on down. 15% max energy shield, another 15% max energy shield, and then we grab this one here. Heavy Buffer, which is a big old 40% increased maximum energy shield at the cost of 10% reduced maximum life. Along with this, you'll notice that guy is lit up at the moment. This is my anoint on my amulet, which allocates hallowed. And this is just to give me increased. I didn't really want to spend the points to go through here, really. And it's pretty cheap. You know, just a blue and 2 stinky green ires. And this just gives us 20% increased stun recovery and also 20% off our maximum energy shield as additional stun threshold. So this is the one I've chosen to anoint on my amulet just because it's cheap, really. If not this one, if you don't have a problem with being stunned, I would suggest taking this one because it's cheap as well. This one gives 40% increased energy shield recharge rate and 10 intel. And this one is also rather cheap. Just 2 green ones and an orange. I don't know what the names of them are, to be honest. But yes, you can see the recipe right there. And then from here, we start getting to our physical. So up here, intel, and then we get 10% increased physical damage. Break armor on critical hit, which for me is all the time, equal to 5% of the physical damage we dealt. Another 5%. Another 10% increased physical damage. And then we get break armor on critical hits equal to 10% of our physical damage dealt. We also have 10% chance to inflict bleeding and a big old 20% increased physical damage. So with these combined, 10%, 5, 5, since I crit all the time, I break armor equal to 20% of the damage that I deal with every single attack. Which is very cool and very nice, especially for bossing. Right, let's loop back here. Intel. Another jewel slot. And as you can see, once again, just focusing on the energy shield and crit damage bonus. The others are just extras, really. And another strength. Why, I don't know. Another intel. And here is another one just worth taking note of. If you don't want to pay the 10% max life here or the 10% mana there, you can take this one, 15% max energy shield, another 15% that leads up towards it. And then it gives you 25% increased maximum energy shield at the end, and +1 to all maximum elemental resist. So this one is just worth taking note of as well. Moving on, intel, and then 10% increased physical damage, 10% increased critical hit chance, another 10% critical hit chance, and then 10% increased critical hit chance, as well as 15% increased magnitudes of damaging ailments that we inflict with crit. That will only be bleeding, that's the only one that we inflict. And then this one here, 15% increased crit chance, 15% increased crit damage, and 15% increased magnitude of damaging ailments we inflict with crits, which I do all the time. So just a very juicy one right there. And then we also grab this one, 15% increased magnitude of bleeding, and then also a big old 25% increased physical damage. And then since we are here, it's only 1 skill point away, grab yourself the jewel slot right here. Okay, from there, let's go to the right hand side here. So jewel slot, intel, and then we have another crit tree here. 10% increased critical hit chance, and then 50% crit damage, another 15% crit damage, and then 25% increased critical hit chance, as well as 25% reduced critical hit chance against us. So it gives us the 25% increased crit chance, as well as a bit of a defensive stat as well. So enemies have 25% reduced critical hit chance when attacking us as well. Bopping up here, intel, just worth taking note of. Here's a big one here. If you are short for intelligence in your gear, just for 1 skill point, you can get a big old 25 intel right there. Moving up, 15% increased maximum energy shield, and then this is a big old one for energy shield. This one gives us 60% increased maximum energy shield at the cost of 20% lower start of energy shield recharge rate. So 60% cannot be ignored, that's a big number. Bob, intel, another jewel socket. Here I've got maximum energy shield and critical spell damage, and the other two at the bottom doesn't really matter. They're irrelevant. from there, let's do this side first. So, intel, intel. And this is another big one for crit. So 10% crit chance, 10% crit chance, and then this one at the very end, at the cost of 20% reduced critical damage, it gives us 50% increased crit chance, which is a big old number. So yeah, this one is super worth it. And then intel, we get some more area of effect here. We get 10% increased spell damage with the first node, then 8% increased area of effect, another 80%, and then this one here, the final repeat of spells, so whether that is our spell echo or the other one, now the steel, I've forgotten what that one's called, whichever one of them is the last reoccurrence of our detonate dead gains an extra 40% increased area of effect, so just massive area of effect. Heading back, let's go down here, intel, and then I like cast speed because it makes quite a big difference when channeling our Bonestorm. So 3% cast speed, another 3% cast speed, and then this one here gives us 5% cast speed along with 15% mana regen and 10 to intelligence. Here's another physical tree. We gain 10% physical right there, another 10% crit chance, well not chance, sorry, crit damage bonus, and then another 10% increased physical damage right there. And then we grab the big one here, 20% increased critical damage, 10 to strength, and another 20% increased physical damage. Let me grab intel, intel, intel. We work our way down here. Intel, intel. Grab ourselves another socket. As always, just shield crit as usual. And then we lean into here. So we start off with a 15% critical damage bonus, 10% increased crit chance, and then 10 dexterity, which we don't really use, but another 20% increased crit chance there. And then 15% crit damage, and then we start leading up to these ones, these three here. So this one gives us a big old 30% increased damage bonus and 10 intel. Then we grab this one gives us 20% increased damage when we've dealt a critical hit recently, another 20% damage when we've dealt a critical hit recently, and then a big old 30% if we've dealt a critical hit recently. And also a nice little 12% increased critical hit chance. So since we crit all the time, that is a solid 30, 50, 70% damage right there all the time. And then coupled with this one at the bottom, so that is a 70%. If you remember this one here, this one also gives us the 30%. So overall, this gives us 106% damage whenever we've crit, which is great to have, as we are very, very crit orientated, obviously. Okay, let's go into our ascendancy. So at the bottom here, 3% increased max life, and then we take this one, which we are forced to take, Sangeomancy, which gives us the life remnants, which we pick up all the time, allows us to overcap on our maximum life, which isn't bad at all. And then it gives us that nasty little affix that our skills have a base life cost equal to the mana cost, which is a bummer, especially since we're forced to take this. Heading to the left, we grab this one here. 12% increased critical hit chance for spells. And then we get this one here, Gorge Bite. This one gives us 1% increased critical damage bonus per 40 life. And I think that this one might be bugged in my opinion. Alright, so just as an example, put that there. So if we have a look at this one there, currently our damage bonus is 428. So if we reduce our max life, let's take, say, something off that gives us quite a lot of life. So there's 116. Take that one off, and I'll take this one off as well. So there's like just about 200 life. That stays the same. This doesn't change. And that is more than 40 life. So this should have changed by at least 1%. So I'm not sure if this is bugged, and if the damage is actually being calculated in the background. I mean, I really hope it is. I'm hoping that it's just like a visual bug, you know, with the numbers that's being displayed here. But since we do get 1% increased damage per 40 life, it should have changed as soon as I took this out, and it hasn't. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about that one. Hopefully it still gives us the damage in the background, however. And then I'm heading towards here, which is the main thing that I'm going for. So we get 12% increased critical chance for spells, and then we grab this one here. The base critical hit chance for spells is 15%. This one is very important because I am, of course, using Detonate Dead. And if we take this one off, let's go here, let's say refund points. So currently you can see our Detonate Dead has 100% because I'm kind of relying on that and then multiplying that. We take this one off. Our crit hit chance drops significantly. In fact, it's suddenly gone. That must be about, let's see, where is the crit hit chance? Oh, it's moved up to here. So currently our crit hit chance is 53%, so massive. The base crit hit chance, let me see if it displays on here. I don't think it does. But I think the base crit hit chance, there it is actually 8% on this one. So this is why we take that skill, to lift this up to 15%. Our Bonestorm, I believe, should still be fine since they are physical spells. And they have got 15% already. So we're taking the skill tree only for that Detonate Dead or any other spell that you want to, lift the base crit hit chance of. So Bone Cage should still be 100% as well. There we go, 100%. So these physical ones already have 15% to start with straight off the bat. It's only for our Detonate Dead, so this crits 100% of the time.
Yes.
Go back, let's chuck that back in. Like so, perfect. And then this is where our life leech comes in. So up until you reach this point, so heading back here, up until you reach this one here, Vitality Siphon, you will need to either use your potions or pick up these life remnants all the time in order to keep your health topped up because of the life cost of every single ability. Which is quite expensive because you can only get this on your 4th Ascendancy unless you don't want to go for these here. So leading up to that, we get 12% increased amount of life leech, and then we of course get our 10% spell damage leached as life. Which is very satisfying. As soon as you get this, it just feels so good. Right, and that should be all of that done. No, hang on, there's one more thing.
Yes.
Right, so I actually forgot about this. So at the moment, let's check. Our Bonestorm, we are on 63k damage. Damage per second. If we don't want to be running maps. So if you're running maps for bosses, like the final map boss, I've forgotten what he's called again, the Arbiter. So if you are bossing exclusively and you don't need the area of effect, then we can increase our damage by quite a lot. So we can take out our area of effect trees, which is this one here and this one there. So we take these out and these out here. And then we instead reinvest them in this tree here. So we grab 10% spell damage, 10% spell damage, another 10, and then a big old 30 at the cost of 5% reduced cast speed. Add that in there. And then I usually take these two. So there is another 15% crit damage, 15% crit damage. And then I also take this one here. 3% increased skill speed and another 5% increased skill speed along with 15% mana regen. So we are now geared specifically for fighting bosses, and you can see our damage has climbed significantly, so by about 10,000 or so is what our Bonestorm, it was 63,000 I believe, so it's climbed up by about 12,000 just by making those few changes, which is always good to know. I always hop between these two when I'm deciding whether I am running and clearing maps or whether I will be boss fighting at the time. Perfect. Okay, so it seems like that is finally our passive skill tree done. Now we'll get to the gear part of things. Gear-wise, currently I'm only running with a single unique, which is of course Ghost Ride, for the sheer amount of energy shield that it gives us. It simply gives us a flat number of energy shield, as well as a chunk of chaos resist. I think I have coupled this with these ones as well. for some extra chaos resist. So this is basically where all of my chaos resist comes from. And this converts 50% of our life into energy shield, which is where the bulk of my energy shield comes from, of course. See, our energy shield is currently 8,700. If I unequip this, we lose 6,000 energy shield. So yeah, this one is very, very useful to stop us from being bursted. Along with that, my belt, I'm just focusing on max life. Try and get max life in as much of your gear as you can. The more max life, the more energy shield. And we of course also use our life as a resource, you know, to cast our spells as well. And then one extra charm slot, which I wouldn't say it's crucial, but it's nice to have. And then just, you know, high resistances. I just got 2 in there. For the charms, I would recommend using a thawing charm as well as a stone charm. This one for being frozen, because 80% of the time that I die, it's due to being frozen and then being swarmed into chain CC, then being like in a stun lock circle. So having just the thawing charm by itself will already stop most of that. But if you can, if you have got a free charm slot, then just get this one for the stun as well. Life, not too much to say there. Just get one that has increased amount of life recovered really, and maybe some that has charges per second as well. Both of these, as well as you can see at the bottom, I've also got gains, a certain amount of charges per second. I would recommend looking for that in your charms, so you can use these multiple times, during a map as well, so they slowly recover over time. Mana, pretty much the same, just increase amount recovered. Along with that, our gloves. Okay, so just get yourself some energy shield gloves with as high max life as possible and a high resistance. And then, quite important, what you can also get in your gloves is you can get increased critical damage bonus in your gloves as well. So that's quite a nice damage boost if you can get that in your gloves. From there, moving up to our wand, the main thing that you want to have is +4 to all physical spell skills. I've got a +4 here, but you can get a +5. But they're super expensive, with the stats as well. So for the moment, I'm just sticking with a +4. Along with that, the second thing that you want to focus is get yourself one that has at least 100% increased critical chance for spells, because we really want to obviously hit 100% or get as much as possible to be as close as 100%. So +4 and then a massive amount of increased critical chance for spells on your wand. Along with that, try and get yourself increased spell physical damage as well. You can see I got a nice 97% on there as well. And then with that you can also get flat increased spell damage as well. So these are all very good stats to have. I believe you can also get increased crit damage on a wand as well. But I think if you have that on top of these stats, it will probably be ludicrously expensive. Next up, let me do the offhand. So the offhand, you can also get +2 spell skills. So make sure that you get one that has +2 to level of all spell skills. I think +2 is the max. I don't think you can get +3. And then along with that, again, focus on the increased critical hit chance for spells. You can see I've got 87% on this one. And an extremely tiny 10% increased spell crit bonus. Along with that, 51% increased spell physical damage as well. So with this one and that one combined, it gets me up to almost 150% increased spell physical damage. Helmet, life as always, some energy shield. Increased rarity of items is also nice if you can get that in there. And then also I got myself one that has increased critical chance just to get myself to the final 100%. So I was short by just a little bit. So if I take this one off, my crit hit chance is 95%. So this one just makes up for that final 5%. And then just a high resistance. Next up, our amulet. This is also one where you want to focus on the +3. So you can get +3 to level of all spell skills. So focus on getting that. And this one is kind of bad, to be honest. But it does give me a chunk, 49% increased maximum energy shield. And a little bit of life, and also spirit. So yeah, the things that you'll probably want to focus on is some spirit, +3 to level of all spell skills, and then some life, energy shield, resistance, whatever. Those sort of things. Hopping on down to my ring, I started focusing on cast speed with these two. Because the faster our cast speed, the faster this Bonestorm of ours channels those projectiles much faster. So you can see currently we are on 63%. This one gives me... Where is the cast speed on this one? It's the other one. This one gives me cast speed. So this one gives me 9% and another 22%. If I take this off, our DPS drops from 63 to 51. So cast speed actually makes a massive difference in your DPS. Right then, so since I was talking about this one to start with this one I just went for max life, some cast speed, there is cast speed in there actually, there is 24%, I was just blind. So max life, cast speed, cold resist, and then mana regen. That is actually the main thing I was focusing. Because your mana does run out, and these breach rings, you can increase their quality all the way up to 50%, so that's why this one gives me a massive 90% increased mana regeneration. So this one here, this was just one I think I just kind of picked up somewhere, but this is where I decided to add some increased item rarity. Always good. Item rarity wise, I normally go for try and get at least 100. I don't think I'm near there at the moment. Currently my item rarity is 61%, so I would say if you can get 100, work it in there, then yeah, sure, go for it. Along with that, we have got some cast speed and some resist, so yeah, nothing much there. The main thing would be the life and the increased rarity on that one there. And finally my boots. When it comes to boots, try and get yourself one that has at least, I would say, 25 or 30% increased movement speed. From there, pretty simple, just get yourself high life, high resist. You can also get increased item rarity on boots as well, so it's another place that you kind of just work that in. Perfect. And that should be everything, I believe. As for these ones, I corrupted them, so you can see I got an extra socket here, as well as an extra socket there. So you can get an extra socket by corrupting items, but you can also mess them up completely as corruption goes. Finally, apart from the items, I'll also show you my Atlas skill tree, just because why not? Okay, so I started here and branched off in this direction. So grab increased pack size, 50% increased rare, because rare monsters, they drop more items based on how many, what are those called again? Modifiers they have. So rare mobs which have more modifiers, they drop more items as well as bosses. So 15% increased rare monsters, another 5%, and then one rare monster in your map is duplicated, just to try and get as many rare monsters as possible. From there, if we go down this direction, we simply have another 3% increased pack size, 25% increased magic monsters, 10% increased magic monsters, and then we have 6% increased quantity of waystones. All of these are 6%, 6%, and another 6% increased waystones. And then this one here, Deadly Evolution. So rare and unique monsters in my maps have an additional 1 to 2 extra modifiers. Be careful with this one if you are struggling with bosses, because these also apply to the bosses. So I've actually, in the past, had very bad luck with some bosses, where they would have an energy shield affix added to them, and then as well something else which is, I believe it was Molten Shell. So if you get a boss that has like a combination of an energy shield modifier along with some kind of regen and Molten Shell, then you really struggle with them. So if you are struggling with the bosses, switch this one off and then throw it to something else. From there, it just went all the way here. 3% increase effect of explicit modifiers, another 3%, and then this one here, 2% increase effect of explicit modifiers on my waystones for each explicit modifier. Pretty simple, we just increase, the amount of rarity or the other affixes that we have on our maps. So this just increases all of those stats there. From there, I kind of looped all the way up here. So, waystones have 10% chance to be higher, another 10% chance to be higher, 10% increased number of monster packs in my maps. And then we'll go down here first. 3% increased number of monster packs in my maps. 3% increased effect of explicit modifiers. Another 3%. And then this one here. I really like this one. So I corrupt all of my maps, by the way. So I take them all the way up to 15, and then I corrupt them. And then all this does is it corrupts them an extra time. So we add this into our maps, and then a lot of times it'll instead upgrade them or downgrade them. You can see the monster level, when you press tab on the map. So it can increase or decrease the map level, but it does add a lot of extra stats. So with the double corruption that comes in, a lot of time, like item rarity, this jumps all the way up to like nearer to 100% because it gets corrupted an additional time. However, if you are doing T16 maps, so if you have a tier 16 map already and you're going for a boss or something, switch this off, because it can happen that you put your tier 16 in and then it corrupts it, and then it instead turns that 16 into a 15. So switch this off whenever you run T16 maps. From there, back here, let's go here. 3% increased number of monster packs in my maps. And this one here, I like this one a lot. So, the main ones I focus on is just the very first line at the top there and the bottom one. So, swamp and water biomaps had 40% increased chance to drop basic currency. So that is fairly simple if you look at the map here. So a swamp map, let's see, is this a swamp one? This is a swamp one there. So that biome type there will be a swamp, and this has 40% increased currency drops. So that would be, exalted orbs and chaos orbs and so on and so on. And then along with item rarity, that has a chance to then upgrade in a perfect world. That basic currency can then drop as a divine orb instead, depending on, the amount of item rarity that you have. So I always focus swamp and water biomes and then grass biome maps, because grass biome maps also have 40% increased chance to drop soccer currency. And in an ideal world, it will drop one of these, and then with item rarity, it can drop as a perfect jeweler's orb, which is obviously worth a lot, so we sell this for some cash. Sweet. Moving on. 8% increased effect of precursor tablets. And another 8%. Another 8%. And head all the way over here. Then another 3% increased pack size. Another 3%. And then waystones have 25% more effect of prefix modifiers or 25% more effect of suffix modifiers on them when opening maps. So that's pretty simple. At the moment, I don't believe it displays them correctly. Yeah, if you hold on Alt on a map, so all of them are currently prefixes. So all of this can be increased by 25% as soon as you open up the map. It can also be bad though, because if you have something where they deal increased damage, additional damage as cold or fire and blah blah blah, then those can also be increased by 25%. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But when it does go well, then it would increase, like in the case with this map, it would increase the item rarity and the increased experience gain by 25%, before it then further gets improved by these ones, 3% increase, 3% increase of the modifiers. So all of this just kind of compiles and then stacks up. And if you have any sort of towers in the area as well, that are affecting them as well, then they will of course have their bonuses as well, depending on if they're being influenced or not. So yeah, you just kind of stockpile on all those affixes and whatnot. And I think that is all done. Yeah, that is my build, guys. Thank you for watching. At the moment, I am only running the one unique, as I said, but if you guys have got any ideas of your own or any modifications to this build, then feel free to, leave them in the comments or any questions, that sort of thing. I'll do my best to answer them if I have the answers for you. Apart from that, I hope you guys have fun in your worlds. Have yourself a blast, no pun intended. Take care and have yourself a wonderful day. This is Zerger saying goodbye and cheers.